The first thing my daughter-in-law said when she walked into my house was not hello. She looked around my living room, smiled, and said, "My mother is going to love this place." I was sitting beside the fireplace holding a cup of coffee. For a few seconds I thought I had misunderstood her. Then I noticed the woman standing behind her. It was her mother, Helen. She was holding a suitcase. That was when I realized they had not come to visit me. They had come to move in. My name is Margaret Hayes and I was 68 years old. I had lived in that house for more than 30 years with my husband Walter. After Walter died, the house became more than a place where I lived. It became the last piece of the life we had built together. Every room carried a memory. The kitchen was where Walter used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. The hallway was where my son Ryan took his first steps. The small bedroom upstairs was where my grandchildren Ethan and Chloe had slept during their first visits, and the garden outside was the place where Walter planted a cherry tree shortly before he became ill. I never imagined that one afternoon my own family would walk through that front door and act as if none of it belonged to me. Sabrina, my daughter-in-law, walked slowly toward the stairs. She was already holding a small measuring tape. I watched her with disbelief. She opened the door to the largest bedroom upstairs. Then she looked back at her mother. "Mom, this room gets the best morning light." Helen smiled nervously. "It is beautiful." Sabrina nodded. "I knew you would like it." I stood up. "What exactly are you doing?" Sabrina looked at me as if I had asked an unreasonable question. "We are getting things organized." Organized for what? She laughed softly. "Margaret, you know we have talked about this." "No, we have not." Ryan came into the room behind them. My son looked uncomfortable. He would not look directly at me. I looked at him. "Ryan," he swallowed. "Mom, why is your wife showing her mother the bedrooms in my house?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Sabrina answered for him, "Because Mom needs somewhere safe to live." I looked at Helen. She lowered her eyes. I felt sorry for her immediately. She looked confused, almost embarrassed. I asked Sabrina a simple question. "Where does your mother live now?" She hesitated. "Her apartment lease ended last week." I stared at her. "And you ended it?" Sabrina folded her arms. "We thought this would be better for everyone." "Everyone?" I repeated. "Who is everyone?" She sighed. "You live alone in a 5-bedroom house. You have more space than you need. Ryan and I are struggling with expenses. Mom needs a stable place, so we thought it made sense." I looked at my son again. "Did you agree to this?" Ryan finally looked at me. "I thought we could talk about it." That was not an answer. He looked down. Sabrina stepped closer. "Margaret, you are making this more difficult than it needs to be." I almost smiled. "No, I am making one thing very clear. Nobody is moving into this house without my permission." The room became completely silent. Sabrina stared at me. Then she laughed. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious." She shook her head. "This is family." I nodded. "Exactly. That is why I expected you to ask me before making plans for my home." Helen finally spoke. "I am sorry, Margaret. I did not realize." Sabrina turned toward her mother. "Mom, this is not your fault." Then she looked at me. "You will change your mind." "No." One word. "Calm, simple, final." Sabrina stared at me as though she had never heard the word before. Then she smiled. "We will see." She walked upstairs anyway. I followed her. She opened another bedroom. "This one would be for storage," she said. Then she pointed toward the basement. "Ryan and I could turn this into an office." I stood at the bottom of the stairs. "You are not turning anything into anything." Sabrina slowly turned around. "Why are you being so stubborn?" "Because it is my house." She walked past me. "You are going to regret treating your family this way." I stepped aside. "Maybe, but I would rather regret saying no than regret giving away the only home I have left." Ryan looked at me with sadness. "Mom, please." I looked into his eyes. "I am not asking you to choose between me and your wife. I am asking you to respect the fact that this house belongs to me." He nodded slowly, but Sabrina grabbed his arm. "Come on, Ryan, we are leaving." Helen stayed behind for a moment. She looked at me. "I am truly sorry." I gave her a gentle smile. "You do not need to apologize for something you did not decide." She nodded and followed them outside. I watched their car disappear down the street. Then I closed the curtains. The house became quiet again. For the first time that day, I felt the weight of what had happened, but I also remembered something Walter once told me. He said, "People show you who they really are when you tell them no." I thought about those words for a long time. Then my doorbell rang again. I assumed they had forgotten something, but when I opened the door, nobody was standing there. There was only a large envelope on the porch. My name was written across the front. Margaret Hayes. I picked it up. The return address belonged to the law office that had handled Walter's estate. I opened the envelope slowly. The first sentence made my hands stop shaking. "Mrs. Hayes, there is an important document your late husband instructed us to deliver only if someone attempted to pressure you into giving up control of your home." I read the sentence twice. Then I looked toward the staircase. For the first time that afternoon, I understood something. Sabrina had made one terrible mistake. She thought my house was the only thing I had to protect. She had no idea what Walter had left behind, and she certainly had no idea that I was about to discover exactly how far my own family was willing to go to take it from me. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I had barely slept. The envelope from Walter's lawyer was still sitting on my kitchen table. I had read the first paragraph so many times that I could almost hear his voice. "There is an important document your late husband instructed us to deliver only if someone attempted to pressure you into giving up control of your home." I did not open the rest Immediately part of me was afraid of what I might find another part of me already knew Walter well enough to understand that he had never done anything without a reason. I made coffee, then I sat at the same table where we had spent thousands of mornings together. I opened the envelope again. Inside was a letter from Daniel Mercer, the attorney who had handled Walter's estate. Mrs. Hayes, your husband visited my office approximately 8 months before his death. He asked me to prepare several documents concerning the family home. At first I assumed he wanted to make routine changes to his estate. I was wrong. I stopped reading 8 months before his death. Walter had already been sick by then. He had known his time was limited, and apparently he had known something else too. I continued. Walter was concerned that after his passing you might feel pressured by family members to sell the property or transfer ownership. He specifically instructed me to make certain that you retained complete control over the house for as long as you wished to live there. I leaned back in my chair. My hands were trembling. Walter had never told me. Why would he keep something like this from me? I kept reading. The document attached to this letter establishes a protected ownership arrangement. Under this arrangement, no family member can force you to sell the property or transfer it while you are living in the home. I closed my eyes. A strange mixture of sadness and relief moved through me. Walter had been protecting me even when I did not know I needed protection. Then I saw the final paragraph. There is also a second document that may become relevant. I froze. The second document concerns an investment account established by your husband. Shortly before his death, the account was funded with assets that were never included in the family accounts you managed together. The purpose was to provide you with financial independence should anyone attempt to pressure you regarding the house. I stared at the page. An investment account. Walter had hidden money from me, not for himself, for me. I picked up the phone and called Daniel. He answered almost immediately. Good morning, Margaret. I need to ask you something. I assume you found the letter. Yes. Why did Walter do this? There was a pause. Because he loved you. I looked out the window. That sounds like something he would say. Daniel continued. Walter told me that you had spent your entire marriage putting everyone else first. He was worried that after he was gone you would continue doing the same thing. I smiled sadly. He knew me too well. He did. Then I asked the question that mattered most. How much is in the account? Daniel gave me the number. I almost dropped the phone. I thought he had made a mistake. Daniel repeated the amount. It was more money than I had ever imagined having available to me. Walter had built it quietly over years. Small investments company shares, a retirement account. He had never mentioned nothing illegal, nothing improper, just carefully protected assets. Why did he never tell me? Daniel answered softly. Because he wanted you to have it when you needed it. I looked around the kitchen. Suddenly the house felt different, not because it had become more valuable, because I understood that Walter had been thinking about my future long after he knew he would not be part of it. I thanked Daniel and ended the call. Then I sat there for another 20 minutes. I could have cried. Instead I felt something stronger, determination. At 11 that morning I heard a vehicle outside. I looked through the window. It was Sabrina. She was carrying 2 large cardboard boxes. I opened the door before she could knock. Good morning, Margaret. I looked at the boxes. What are those? Some of Mom's things. I thought we agreed nobody was moving in. Sabrina smiled. You said that yesterday. Yes, and I am saying it again today. She stepped closer. We are not moving everything yet, I repeated. She sighed. Margaret, please, we are trying to make this work. I looked behind her. There was another vehicle parked at the curb, a small moving van. I pointed toward it. Is that your idea of not moving? And her smile disappeared. You are being impossible. No, I am being clear. She lowered the boxes onto my porch. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. You cannot keep Ryan from helping his own family. I looked at her. I have never tried to stop Ryan from helping anyone. Then what is the problem? The problem is that you decided what my help would look like without asking me. She crossed her arms. You have 5 bedrooms. I have 1 house. You have a large basement. I have 1 basement. You have room for everyone. I have room for myself. She stared at me. You really mean this? I nodded yes. She picked up one of the boxes. Fine, but do not blame us when this family falls apart. I watched her walk back toward the van. Before she reached it, I called her name. Sabrina. She turned. Take the boxes with you. She looked confused. They are staying here. No. She looked at the front door. Margaret, they are just boxes today. They are boxes. Tomorrow they become furniture. Next week they become bedrooms, and before long I will be standing in my own hallway asking permission to use my own kitchen. Her face hardened. You are paranoid maybe, but I am not careless. She picked up the boxes angrily. Then she carried them back to the van. I watched until the vehicle disappeared. Only then did I notice Ryan standing across the street. He had seen everything. He walked toward me slowly. Mom, I opened the door. Come inside. He hesitated. I think Sabrina is angry. I almost laughed. I know she is furious. Ryan stepped into the hallway. He looked around at the family photographs. Dad built that shelf. Yes, I remember. He touched the edge of the wooden shelf. I used to hide my baseball cards here. You did, Mom. I am sorry. I looked at him. For what? For not stopping her yesterday. I did not answer immediately. Ryan looked exhausted. She thinks you have too much space. I have heard that she thinks we are struggling. Are you? He looked away. Yes. How bad? He stayed silent. Ryan, he finally sat down. We have debts. How much? He rubbed his face. Enough, that was not an answer, he sighed. The business did not do as well as we expected. What business? A small online business. I never knew you started one. Sabrina wanted to try something. And now we owe money. I understood suddenly. The house was not just a house to them, it was a solution. I looked at my son. Did Sabrina think living here would solve those problems? He did not answer. That was answer enough. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding. Did she ask you to convince me to give her mother a room? Ryan looked down. She asked me to talk to you, and did you? I tried when yesterday before you arrived. My heart sank. So when you walked into my house yesterday, you already knew what was happening. I did not know she would bring mom with her. But you knew she wanted to move her, and yes, I looked away for the first time. I understood why his silence had hurt me so much. He had not been surprised. He had simply hoped I would surrender before he had to ask. Ryan stood. Mom, I never wanted to hurt you. I know. Then why did you let this happen? He looked at me with tears in his eyes. Because I did not want another fight with Sabrina. I nodded slowly. There. It is what the real problem. You are not protecting your family by avoiding conflict. You are allowing one person to make every decision because you are afraid of what happens when you say no. Ryan had no answer. I walked toward the kitchen. I made him coffee. We sat together quietly for the first time in months. I saw the little boy who used to sit at that same table doing his homework while Walter cooked dinner. I wanted to protect him, but I also knew something important. Protecting my son did not mean surrendering my life. Before Ryan left, he stood near the door. What are you going to do? I looked at the envelope from Walter's lawyer. I am going to find out exactly what your father prepared. Ryan frowned. Dad prepared something. I nodded, and I think he knew one day I would need it. Ryan looked worried. Mom, I placed my hand on his shoulder. Whatever happens next, I love you. He nodded. I love you too. Then he walked away. I closed the door. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was Daniel Mercer. His voice was serious. Margaret, yes. I found something else. Something Walter specifically told me not to reveal unless someone attempted to take control of your house. I sat down. What did he leave? Daniel took a breath. A trust. And you are the only person who can activate it. I stared at the closed door. Then he said the words that changed everything. If your family continues trying to force you out, you will not just be able to keep the house, you will be able to decide exactly what happens to it after you are gone. I realized then that the battle was no longer about who would sleep in which bedroom. It was about who would control the future of everything Walter and I had built, and I had a feeling Sabrina had no idea that the rules had just changed. The next morning, I drove to Daniel Mercer's office before the sun was fully above the trees. I had spent the entire night thinking about what Walter had prepared: a trust and investment account, a document that could determine what happened to my house after I was gone. But there was one thing I could not understand: why had Walter believed I would ever need such protection? When I entered Daniel's office, he was already waiting. He stood and shook my hand, then he closed the door. Margaret, before we begin, I want you to understand something. What your husband was not suspicious of your son. He was worried about your kindness. I frowned. What does that mean? Walter knew you would give almost anything to keep your family happy. Daniel opened a folder. He showed me several documents. The first one confirmed that I had complete control over the house. The second established the trust. The third contained instructions Walter had written personally. I recognized his handwriting immediately. My hands began to tremble. I had not seen that handwriting since the week before he died. I read the first line: Margaret, if you are reading this, then someone has made you feel that keeping our home is selfish. I stopped. I could barely breathe. Daniel quietly looked away and gave me time. I continued: please remember that this house was never meant to become a burden. It was meant to be your shelter. You spent 30 years taking care of me. Now, I want you to take care of yourself. Tears rolled down my face. I wiped them away. Then I kept reading: if Ryan ever needs help, give it, because you want to never give it because someone makes you feel guilty. And if anyone tells you that family means surrendering your peace, do not believe them. Family should make your home feel safer, not smaller. I closed my eyes. That was Walter. Every word sounded like him. Daniel handed me a tissue. There is more. I looked up. He turned another page. Walter created a financial reserve for you. The account can cover your living expenses for the rest of your life. You do not need to sell the house. You do not need to move. And you do not need anyone else to support you. I stared at him. Why did he do all of this? Because he knew what kind of man he was. I looked confused. Daniel continued: Walter said that after he died, he could no longer protect you physically, so he wanted to make sure you could protect yourself financially. I looked down at the papers. For the first time since Walter's death, I felt completely safe, not because I had money, because I knew I was allowed to say no. Before I left the office, Daniel gave me one final document. This is the part one thing you need to understand most. I read it. If any person attempts to pressure Margaret Hayes into transferring ownership of the family home, the trust can prevent that transfer. I looked at Daniel. Does this mean Sabrina cannot do anything? She cannot take the house, but she can still cause problems. I sighed. That Is exactly what I am worried about. Daniel nodded. Then document everything. I thanked him and drove home. When I reached my street, I immediately noticed something strange. There was a moving truck parked in front of my house again. I parked in the driveway. Before I could get out, Sabrina came toward me. She was smiling. Too much good timing. I looked at the truck. What is this? She opened her arms. I thought we could start fresh. I looked behind her. Several men were carrying furniture toward my front door. Stop, they froze. Sabrina rolled her eyes. Margaret, please. I walked toward the truck. Take everything back. One of the movers looked at Sabrina. She nodded. Keep going. I turned toward him. I am the homeowner. He stopped immediately. Sabrina stepped between us. She has dementia. I froze. What did you just say? She lowered her voice. I told them you were confused. I stared at her. You told a moving company I have dementia. You have been forgetting things lately. I could not believe what I was hearing. I took out my phone. Then I called the police. Sabrina suddenly looked nervous. You are really doing this? Yes. She grabbed my arm. Do not embarrass me. I pulled my arm away. You should have thought about that before you tried to move strangers into my home. The movers began unloading the furniture. I told them to stop. Within 20 minutes the truck was gone. Sabrina remained on the sidewalk. Her face had changed. The smile was gone. You are going to destroy your relationship with Ryan. I looked at her. No, you are doing that yourself. She stepped closer. You think you can keep us out forever? I looked directly into her eyes. Yes. Then she said something I knew she would regret. Ryan has a legal right to this house someday. I smiled. Someday is not today. She turned away. I thought that was the end of it. It was not. That evening Ryan arrived. He looked furious. Not at me, at Sabrina. Mom, I heard what happened. I nodded. She told movers I was mentally incapable. Ryan closed his eyes. I know. Did you know she was bringing the truck? No. Did you know she planned to move furniture into my house? No. I believed him, but there was something else in his face. Fear. What happened? He sat down. Sabrina told me she was going to convince you. How? She said she had spoken to someone who, a lawyer. I felt my stomach tighten for what she said. There might be a way to force a sale if you were no longer capable of managing the property. I looked at my son. And did she say I was incapable? Ryan looked down. She said you were becoming forgetful. I stood very still. Ryan, I am going to ask you one question. He looked up. Has anyone contacted a doctor about me? He shook his head. No. Has anyone asked you to sign anything concerning my health? No. Then why is she telling people I cannot manage my own life? Ryan had no answer. I walked into the kitchen and returned with the folder Daniel had given me. I placed it on the table. Your father prepared this before he died. Ryan opened the folder. His eyes widened. What is this? Protection for Mom. He read the documents carefully. Then he looked at me. Dad knew this could happen. I nodded. He thought someone might pressure me. Ryan stared at the papers. He had tears in his eyes. I should have protected you. I reached across the table. You are protecting me now. He shook his head. No, Mom, I am late, but I am trying. That was the first time I believed him. Then his phone rang. Sabrina. He looked at the screen. Do not answer if you do not want to. He hesitated. Then he answered. What? I watched his face change. His expression went from concern to disbelief. Where are you? A pause. Why are you there? Another pause. Ryan stood. You did what? He ended the call. I asked what happened. He looked at me. Sabrina is at the county records office. Why? He swallowed. She is trying to file something against the property. My heart stopped. What exactly? Ryan shook his head. I do not know. I grabbed my purse. Then we are going to find out. As we walked toward the door, I looked at the folder Walter had left behind. For the first time, I understood why he had prepared everything so carefully. He had not been protecting me from strangers. He had been protecting me from the moment someone I loved decided that my kindness was an opportunity, and now that person was trying to put something official on paper, something that could change everything. By the time Ryan and I reached the county records office, the sun was already setting. I could feel my heart pounding as we walked through the glass doors. I had never been inside that building before. I had never needed to know anything about property records. For 30 years I had simply paid the bills. I trusted Walter. I trusted my family, and I had never imagined that one day I would have to defend my right to live in my own home. A clerk looked up from behind the counter. Can I help you? I gave her my name, Margaret Hayes. She typed something into her computer. Then she looked at Ryan. Are you related? My son stepped forward. I am her son. The clerk nodded. What can I do for you? I looked at her. Someone may have attempted to file a document concerning my property today. She typed again. Then her expression changed slightly. There is a pending submission. My stomach tightened. What kind of submission? She looked at the screen. A notice of financial interest filed by a company called Northbridge Capital Solutions. Ryan looked at me. I had never heard of that company. Neither had I. I asked the clerk, what does it mean? She explained that the document claimed a financial interest connected to the property. It did not transfer ownership, but if accepted it could create problems if the property were later sold or refinanced. I felt a cold wave move through me. Who filed it? The clerk checked the record. There is an authorized representative listed. She turned the screen slightly toward me. Sabrina Cole. I closed my eyes. Ryan whispered, oh my God. The clerk continued, the filing is still being reviewed. It has not been accepted. Can I stop it? You need to speak with the county legal department. I thanked her, Ryan, and I walked outside. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then Ryan said, Mom, I am so sorry. I looked at him. Do not apologize for something you did not do, but I should have seen this coming. You saw what you wanted to see. He looked down. I thought Sabrina was Trying to help her mother, so did Helen. Ryan rubbed his face. She told me the house would eventually belong to me anyway. I stopped walking. She told you that? Yes, when weeks ago. Why did you never tell me? Because I thought it was just something she said. I stared at him. Ryan, words become dangerous when people start making plans around them. He nodded. We called Daniel from the parking lot. He answered immediately. Margaret, I was expecting your call. How did you know? Because I received an inquiry from the county. My heart sank. What should I do? Do not sign anything I have not. Good, and do not allow Sabrina to convince you that this is merely paperwork. Daniel sounded more serious than I had ever heard him. She is trying to establish a financial claim. Can she do that? Not successfully. If the documents Walter created are properly recorded, then record them. I want everything protected. Daniel paused. I can prepare the filing tonight. Do it. We ended the call. Ryan looked at me. What happens now? We go home. I thought the worst was over, but when we arrived at my house, another surprise was waiting. Helen was standing on my porch. She looked frightened. I got out of the car. Helen, she turned toward me. Margaret, what happened? She looked at Ryan, then back at me. I need to tell you something before Sabrina finds out I am here. I opened the door. Come inside. We sat in the living room. Helen kept twisting a tissue between her fingers. I have made a terrible mistake. What kind of mistake? She took a deep breath. I signed something. Ryan immediately leaned forward. What did you sign? Helen looked ashamed. A document Sabrina gave me. She said it was only to prove that I was willing to live with you. My heart sank. Did it mention the house? I do not know. She started crying. I was confused. Sabrina told me you had agreed to let me stay here. I believed her. I reached across the table. Helen, you were lied to. She wiped her eyes. I know that now. What did you sign? She opened her purse and pulled out several folded pages. I took them carefully. The document was not a lease. It was not a simple statement. It was an affidavit. It claimed that I had verbally agreed to allow Helen permanent occupancy of the property. I looked at Ryan. He was stunned. Mom, this is serious. I know. Helen covered her face. I am so sorry. I took a breath. Helen, look at me. She lowered her hands. You were deceived too, but I signed it because you trusted your daughter. That does not make you responsible for her actions. Helen began crying again. Ryan looked at the document. Can this be used against Mom? Daniel will handle it. I stood. Then I noticed something. There was a second page attached. I read it carefully. It stated that Helen had allegedly contributed financially toward improvements to the property. I looked at her. Did you ever give me money for this house? No. Did you ever pay for repairs? No. Did you ever buy anything for the property? She shook her head. Then this is false. Helen stared at the paper. I did not know. I know. I called Daniel again. He told me to photograph every page. Then he said something that made me realize how serious this had become. Margaret, you need to understand that this is no longer a family disagreement. This is an attempt to create a legal position. I sat down. What should I do? Document everything. Keep every message, keep every receipt, keep every envelope, and most importantly, do not meet Sabrina alone. I looked toward the front door. She had never physically threatened me, but I suddenly understood what Daniel meant. People who believe they are entitled to something can become unpredictable when they realize they may lose it. That evening, Ryan stayed with me. Helen went to a nearby hotel. I did not want her returning to Sabrina yet. Around 10:30, my phone rang. It was Sabrina. I answered. Her voice was cold. Where is my mother? I did not answer immediately. She is safe. You had no right to keep her there. She came here voluntarily. She is confused because you have been filling her head with lies. I looked at Ryan. Then I said, your mother showed me what you asked her to sign. Silence. Then Sabrina said, you do not understand what that document means. I understand exactly what it means. No, you do not. She raised her voice. You have been manipulating everyone since Walter died. I felt my anger rising, but I kept my voice calm. Do not use my husband's death to justify what you are doing. You think you can control everything because you have money. This has nothing to do with money. Everything is about money to you. She went silent. Then she said something I would never forget. If you keep fighting us, you will never see your grandchildren again. Ryan stood up immediately. Mom, I put the phone on speaker. Sabrina continued, Ethan and Chloe will not come to your house anymore. I looked at Ryan. His face had gone pale. I answered quietly, do not use children as weapons. You made your choice. No, I corrected her. You made yours. Then I ended the call. Ryan stared at the phone. She cannot do that. She just did. He sat down. Mom, I am going to talk to her. Not tonight. I cannot let her do this. You cannot force her to become reasonable. Then what do? I looked at him. Protect your children and protect yourself. He looked toward the window for a long time. He said nothing. Then he whispered, I think I have been afraid of her for years. I turned toward him. That is something you need to face. He nodded. The next morning, Daniel arrived at my house with 2 other attorneys. They reviewed the documents Helen had signed. Then Daniel looked at me. There is one important thing you need to know. What Walter did not just protect your ownership, he also anticipated someone trying to create a false claim against the property. He opened his briefcase. Inside was another sealed envelope. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Walter's. Daniel placed it in front of me. Your husband left instructions that this envelope should only be opened if someone Attempted to place a financial claim against the house. My hands went cold. I looked at Ryan, then at Daniel. What is inside? Daniel shook his head. I have never opened it. Walter instructed me to give it directly to you. I slowly broke the seal. Inside was a single page. I read the first sentence, and suddenly I understood. Walter had known exactly what Sabrina was capable of, and the next sentence revealed why he had never told me. Until now he had already prepared evidence that could destroy the entire story she had been telling my family. I stared at the page for several seconds before I could bring myself to read the next line. If you are reading this, then someone has attempted to claim something that does not belong to them. My hands began to shake. Ryan stood behind me. Mom. I held up my hand. Let me finish. The letter continued. I kept records because I knew you would never think to protect yourself from family. I looked at Daniel. He nodded. Quietly I continued reading. There was a time when Ryan asked me for money to start a business. I agreed, but I did not give him the money directly. I created a separate account and paid the expenses myself. My heart stopped. Ryan looked confused. What does that mean? I kept reading. The business was never successful. I eventually discovered that some of the money had been transferred into another account controlled by Sabrina. I looked at my son. He went completely pale. That cannot be right. Walter continued. I confronted Ryan about it. He told me he trusted Sabrina. I decided not to destroy their marriage. Instead, I closed the account. I warned Ryan that if financial pressure ever became a reason for someone to target our home, he needed to protect his mother before protecting his pride. Ryan covered his mouth. I had never known any of this, neither had I. Daniel spoke softly. Walter never wanted you to know because he believed Ryan would eventually make his own decisions. I turned another page. There was a list of dates, payments, transfers, names, and one company, Northbridge Capital Solutions, the same company that had filed the notice against my house. I looked at Ryan. He stared at the paper. I swear I did not know they were connected. I believe you, but Sabrina knew. He sat down heavily. I cannot believe this. I handed the papers to Daniel. Can this prove what she is doing? It can help establish intent. Daniel looked through the records. There is something else here. He pointed to a line near the bottom. Walter had written that he believed Sabrina was planning to use future inheritance as collateral for a business debt. I felt sick. So this was never about helping Helen. It was about getting control of the house. Daniel nodded. It appears that way. Ryan stood suddenly. I need to talk to Sabrina. No. He looked at me. Why not? Because you are angry. She needs to hear me. She will manipulate you. I know. For the first time Ryan said those words without hesitation. I know. Then he took out his phone. He called Sabrina. She answered almost immediately. Where are you? Ryan asked. At home. I need to talk to you about. What about Mom? There was a pause. What did she tell you? Ryan looked at me. He was trembling. I know about Northbridge. Silence. Then Sabrina said, who told you? That was enough. Ryan closed his eyes. So it is true. You do not understand. I understand enough. No, you do not. Sabrina became defensive. We were desperate. I thought we could solve everything by using my mother's house. By using your mother's house. She corrected him. Ryan shook his head. You knew Mom would never agree. I thought she would eventually. You told Helen she had permission. I did not lie. You did. She signed an affidavit because she believed Mom had agreed. Sabrina went silent. Then she said, I was trying to protect my mother. Ryan laughed bitterly. You were trying to protect yourself. That is not fair. Neither was what you did. I watched my son struggle to keep his voice steady. Then he asked, how much do we owe? Sabrina did not answer. How much? Enough. That word again. Ryan sounded exhausted. Tell me the truth. Finally, she said a number. I saw Ryan close his eyes. It was far more than he had ever admitted to me. He sat down. How long have you known? Months. And you thought getting Mom to sign over the house would solve it. I thought we could refinance using the property. You were going to put my mother at risk. She is old. She does not understand these things. Ryan stood up. Do not talk about Mom like that. You were the one who let her sign. I did not know, but you should have known. The call ended. Ryan stared at the phone for a moment. He looked like a completely different person. Not my frightened son, not the man who had spent years avoiding arguments. He looked like someone who had finally reached the end of his fear. I am done. I looked at him. Are you sure? He nodded. I cannot keep doing this. He turned toward Daniel. What can I do? Daniel answered carefully. First, you need your own attorney. Why? Because your wife has created financial obligations without telling you everything. Ryan looked at me. Mom, I know I cannot solve this for you. He nodded. I know. That afternoon Ryan left to meet with an attorney. I stayed home with Helen. She had been sitting quietly near the window. After a long silence she said, I never knew. I know I raised Sabrina to be strong. She is strong. Helen shook her head. There is a difference between being strong and believing you are entitled to everything you want. I smiled sadly. You are right. She looked at me. Do you hate her? I thought about the question. No, but I do not trust her. Helen nodded. Neither do I anymore. Then she said something unexpected. I need to tell you something else. I looked at her. What? A few months ago Sabrina asked me to convince you to sell the house. Why? She said she wanted to buy a larger property. I frowned. She never told me that because she knew you would say no. What changed? Helen looked down. She said the house was worth more than you realized. My stomach tightened. How much? Helen gave me a number. It was close to the amount of debt Sabrina and Ryan had accumulated. Everything suddenly made sense. Sabrina did not need the house because her mother needed somewhere to live. She needed the house because the house was valuable. She had built an entire story around Helen because she knew I would feel guilty refusing an elderly woman. That realization hurt more than the money. She had used her own mother as a weapon. And Helen had not even known. That evening I received another call from Daniel. The county has suspended the filing. I exhaled. Thank God. There is more. What we found. Another document. Another one. Yes, it was submitted electronically several weeks ago. The document lists Ryan as a potential beneficiary of the property. I frowned, but that is not true. I know. Daniel sounded concerned, which means someone has been preparing this for a while. I asked him to send me a copy. He did. I opened the document on my computer. There was my name, my address, my signature. I stared at it. The signature looked like mine, but I knew immediately that it was not. I had never signed that document. Ryan returned home an hour later. I showed it to him. He looked horrified. Mom, I did not do this. I know. Then who did? I looked at the signature again. The handwriting was close enough to fool someone who did not know me well, but there was one small difference. Walter had taught me years ago to sign my name with a particular final stroke, a small curve at the end. The signature on the document did not have it. I called Daniel. He told me not to contact Sabrina. He would handle it legally. I agreed, but before we ended the call he said, Margaret, there is something you need to prepare yourself for. What if someone forged your signature? Then this is much more serious than a family dispute. I looked at Ryan. He was staring at the floor. I knew. The next morning I woke up to 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Then a message appeared. We need to talk before this becomes a legal matter. There was no name, but I knew exactly who had sent it. Sabrina. I did not respond. 10 minutes later another message arrived. You have no idea what I am capable of. I stared at the screen. Then I deleted nothing. I saved every message, every call, every document, every piece of evidence, because Walter had been right. The greatest mistake I could make now would be assuming that someone I loved would never go too far. And that morning I finally understood something. Sabrina was no longer trying to move her mother into my house. She was trying to make it look as if my house already belonged to her family, and if she had forged my signature. Once I had no idea what she would try to forge next. The next morning I did something I had never imagined I would have to do. I installed cameras around my house, not because I was afraid of strangers, because I was beginning to understand that the person I needed to protect myself from already knew where every door and window was. Daniel had advised me not to confront Sabrina, so I did not. I stayed quiet. I kept every message, every document, every photograph, every conversation, and for the first time in my life I stopped trying to explain myself to people who had already decided what they wanted from me. At 9:30 that morning Daniel called. Margaret, I have an update. I sat down at the kitchen table. Tell me, the county has officially rejected the filing against your property. I closed my eyes. Thank God. But there is another issue. I opened my eyes. What now? The document containing your forged signature has been referred for investigation. I looked toward the window. Can they prove who created it? Not yet, but there is enough information to investigate. I felt a strange sadness, not anger, sadness, because there had been a time when I would have defended Sabrina without asking questions. I would have said there must be some misunderstanding. Now I was waiting for evidence that might prove she had deliberately forged my name. Daniel continued, there is one more thing you need to know. What the company connected to Northbridge is owned by someone named Victor Cole. I froze. Cole? Yes. Does Sabrina know him? We believe he is her brother. I sat completely still. Sabrina had never mentioned a brother, at least not to me. Daniel said he would send me the information. Then he warned me again, do not contact Victor. The first will not. And Margaret, yes, do not let Sabrina into your house. I promised. When the call ended I sat there thinking about the family. I thought I knew. How could I have missed so much? A few minutes later Helen walked into the kitchen. She looked tired. Did you sleep a little? She sat across from me. Margaret, I need to tell you about Victor. The first looked at her. You know him? He is my son. I stared at her. Sabrina has a brother. Yes. Why did nobody tell me? Helen looked down. Victor has been in trouble with money for years. What kind of trouble? Loans, businesses, investments, people who promise things they cannot deliver. I understood. And Sabrina has been helping him. Helen nodded. She has always felt responsible for him. I asked quietly, is that why they wanted my house? Helen began to cry. I think so. She told me Sabrina had approached her several months earlier. She said the family could solve everything if they could get access to the property. Helen had refused at first, but Sabrina told her Margaret had already agreed. That was the lie that started everything. Helen looked at me. I believed her. I am sorry. I reached across the table. You believed your daughter. That is not something I can blame you for. Helen wiped her eyes. But I should have asked you. Yes, you should have. She nodded. At least now we both know the truth. That afternoon I received an email from Daniel. It contained records showing that Victor had contacted a private lender several months earlier. The collateral listed was not his property. It was my house. I felt sick. There was no legal transfer, but someone had been presenting my property as if it could become collateral. I printed everything. Then I put the documents into a folder. My phone rang. Ryan, Mom. Yes. I met with the attorney. What did he say? He says Sabrina has been hiding debts from me. How much? Enough that I do not know how we are going to fix this. I was silent. Then Ryan said something unexpected. I want to move out. I sat up straight. Are you sure? Yes, I cannot stay in this marriage if everything depends on lying to my mother. I did not tell him what to do. That decision belonged to him. Where will you go? I have a friend who has a spare room. I can stay there for a while. I could hear the pain in his voice. Mom, I know you love me. I do, but I need to ask you something. What do you think? I am a bad person. The question broke my heart. No, then why do I feel like one? Because you allowed yourself to become someone you were not. Silence. But people can change. Can I? Yes, but you have to stop blaming fear for your choices. He took a long breath. I understand. Then he asked, can I come by tonight? Of course. That evening Ryan arrived with a small bag. He looked exhausted. He stood at the front door for several seconds. I thought he was going to say something. Instead he hugged me. I held him tightly. For the first time in months my son was not trying to keep everyone happy. He was simply my son. We sat in the kitchen. I made dinner. He helped me set the table. It felt almost normal. Then he said, I need to tell you something else. I looked at him. What? Sabrina has been recording some of your conversations. My heart sank. Why? She wanted to use them against you. For what? To make it appear that you had promised to let Helen live here. I stared at him. How long? I do not know, but she showed me recordings. I asked him what they contained. Mostly ordinary conversations, nothing important, but she had taken certain sentences out of context. I closed my eyes. That explained the confidence she had been building, a story one piece at a time. Ryan continued, she also told people you were becoming forgetful. I shook my head. I know she told the movers. I know she told the county. I know. Ryan looked at me. Mom, I think she wanted to make everyone believe you were incapable of making decisions. I looked at the folder on the table, but she made one mistake. What? She assumed nobody would look closely. I opened the folder. Your father kept records. Ryan looked at the documents. I showed him the evidence connecting Victor to the financial claim. He read every page. Then he whispered, she did this because of my uncle. I nodded. He leaned back. I cannot believe this. Neither can I. For several minutes we sat in silence. Then Ryan said, I need to call her. I looked at him. Why? Because I want her to hear me. Say it. Say what? That I will not help her. Take your home. He called. Sabrina answered. Where are you? Ryan asked. That is none of your business. I am at Mom's. Silence. You need to come home. No. What do you mean? No, I mean I am not coming back. She began crying. Ryan, please, I know everything. What do you know? Victor Northbridge, the forged signature, the recordings. There was a long silence. Then Sabrina said, you have been talking to your mother. Yes, and you believe her over me. This is not about choosing sides. It is about facts. You are destroying our family. No, Ryan answered calmly. You destroyed our trust. Sabrina started shouting. You have no idea what I did for you. I know exactly what you did. You put my mother at risk. You lied to Helen. You lied to me. And you tried to take my mother's house. That is not what happened. Then tell me what happened. She said nothing. Ryan waited. Still nothing. Finally he said, I am done. He ended the call. His hands were shaking. I placed my hand over his. You did the right thing. He looked at me. I do not feel like I did. You will. Later that night Ryan went upstairs to sleep in the guest room. I remained downstairs. I walked through the house slowly. The house Walter and I had built. The house Sabrina had tried to turn into a financial solution. I stopped in front of Walter's photograph. I whispered, you knew. The room was silent. Then I heard something outside a car door. I looked through the window. A dark sedan was parked across the street. Someone was sitting inside watching my house. I did not move. I turned off the lights. The car remained there. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally the vehicle drove away. I called Daniel. I told him what happened. He said, Margaret, do not go outside. I will report it. I stood in the dark hallway listening to the silence. For the first time I understood that the situation had gone far beyond family arguments. Someone was watching my home. Someone had forged my signature. Someone had tried to place a financial claim against my property, and someone was willing to use my grandchildren to pressure me. I had spent my whole life believing that love meant trusting people, but Walter had taught me something different. Love did not mean ignoring the truth. The next morning Daniel arrived with another envelope. He looked serious. Margaret, we found the person who submitted the forged document. I opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of the submission record. The name at the bottom was not Sabrina, it was someone else. I looked at Daniel. Who is this? He hesitated. Victor Cole. I stared at the name. Then I looked toward the hallway where Ryan was standing, and suddenly we both understood. Sabrina had not been acting alone. She had brought her brother into this. And now the person who had been trying to take my home was no longer hiding behind my daughter-in-law. He was coming directly for me. I had spent my whole life believing that family meant protecting one another. That morning I finally understood that sometimes protecting your family means protecting them from the people they are too afraid to confront. Victor Cole was coming for my house, and this time I was ready. Daniel placed the document on my kitchen table. The name at the bottom was unmistakable, Victor Cole. I looked at Ryan. He had gone completely silent. That is my uncle, he whispered. I know. Ryan picked up the paper and read it. Again he did this. Daniel nodded. The evidence points directly to him. Ryan looked toward the window. I never thought he would go this far. Neither did I. Daniel sat down. There is something else. I looked at him. What? Victor did not simply submit a false document. He contacted a private lender using your property information. He presented himself as someone with authority over the property. I felt a chill. Did he use my name? Not directly, but he represented that the property was available as collateral. Ryan shook his head. How could he think he could get away with that? Because he believed no one would challenge him quickly enough. Daniel opened another folder. There are records of several communications between Victor and the lender. The earliest one is from 3 months ago. 3 months, I repeated. That means this started before Sabrina brought Helen here. Daniel nodded, which means the plan was already underway. I looked at Ryan. Your wife knew. He looked down. I think she did. I could hear the pain in his voice. I wanted to believe she was only desperate, but this was planned. Yes. Daniel closed the folder. Margaret, there is one thing I need you to do. What? Stop trying to save everyone. I looked at him. He continued. You have spent days worrying about Ryan, Helen, your grandchildren, even Sabrina, but right now you need to think about yourself. I smiled faintly. Walter told you the same thing, did he not? Daniel smiled many times for the first time in days. I laughed. Then I asked, what happens to Victor? That depends on what the investigation finds. And Sabrina the same. I looked at Ryan. He was staring at the floor. I knew he was hurting. Whatever happened next, he would lose his marriage, maybe his home, maybe his business, but I could not fix those things for him. I could only tell him the truth. Ryan, he looked up. You did not create this, but you allowed it to continue. I know you cannot change what happened, but you can decide what happens next. He nodded. I am going to tell the truth, even if it destroys everything. That is the only way you can rebuild anything. That afternoon, Ryan left to meet with the investigators. Helen stayed with me for hours. We sat quietly. Then she said something I had never expected. I want to help you. You already have. No, I need to tell them everything Sabrina told me. I looked at her. Are you sure? Yes, I believed my daughter because she was my daughter, but now I know the truth. Helen took a breath. She told me about the first time Sabrina mentioned your house. She told me about the money. She told me about Victor. And she told me that she planned to convince you to sell. I listened carefully. Then Helen pulled a small notebook from her purse. I wrote some things down. Why? Because I started becoming suspicious. She handed it to me. Dates, conversations, amounts, names, everything was there. I looked at Daniel. When I showed him this could be very important, he photographed every page. Then he looked at Helen. You did the right thing. Helen nodded. I should have done it sooner. That evening something unexpected happened. My grandchildren arrived. Ethan and Chloe stood at the front door with Ryan. I opened it. Ethan ran into my arms. Grandma. I hugged him tightly. Chloe followed. I had not seen them in weeks. I looked at Ryan. What happened? He smiled sadly. They wanted to see you. I knelt down. I missed you both. Ethan looked around. Is everything okay? I smiled. Everything is going to be okay. He nodded. Then Chloe handed me a small drawing. It was our house. There were flowers in the garden, and all of us were standing outside, even Sabrina, even Grandpa. I felt tears fill my eyes. I hugged her. Thank you, sweetheart. She whispered, I want everyone to be happy again. I looked at Ryan. Then I realized something. The children did not understand money. They did not understand property. They did not understand debt. They only understood love, and the adults had almost destroyed that because they were too busy fighting over what belonged to whom. That night Ryan stayed with the children in the guest room. I sat outside in the garden. The cherry tree moved gently in the wind. Walter had planted it years ago. I touched the trunk. I wish you were here. A voice behind me answered. He would be proud of you. I turned. It was Ryan. He sat beside me. The kids are asleep. Good. He looked at the tree. Dad planted this. Yes, I remember. He was terrible at gardening. I laughed. He almost killed it 3 times. Ryan smiled. Then his expression changed. Mom, what? I need to tell you something. He looked down at his hands. The business money. I know. No, there is more. I waited. Some of the money Sabrina used was mine. I frowned. What do you mean? Before we married I had savings. She convinced me to invest it. How much? Almost everything. I looked at him. She told me it was temporary, and then she lost it. I was silent. Why did you never tell me? Because I was ashamed. I placed my hand on his shoulder. You should never have carried that alone. I know. Then he looked at me. There is something worse. What? I found an email on her computer. It was from Victor. What did it say? He believed that once you were declared incapable of managing the property, the house could be placed under temporary control. I felt my stomach tighten. Temporary control? Yes. He wanted a court-appointed manager. And then Ryan looked directly at me. He planned to sell the property. I closed my eyes. Everything finally made sense. The story about my memory, the forged signature, the false affidavit, the moving truck, the financial claim, none of it was random. They had been building a case, a false case, piece by piece. I looked at Ryan. Did Sabrina know about the plan? Yes. He paused. She knew. I felt something inside me break, not because I had ever loved Sabrina, but because she had once sat at my kitchen table and called me Mom. She had hugged me at Christmas. She had cried at Walter's funeral. And all that time she had been calculating the value of my house. I stood up. I am done feeling guilty. Ryan looked at me. What are you going to do? I looked toward the house. Tomorrow we meet the investigators and I am going to tell them everything. The next morning Daniel arrived with the investigators. They asked questions for nearly 3 hours. I gave them every document, every message, every recording, every photograph. Helen gave them her notebook. Ryan gave them access to the emails. Then one investigator asked me a question. Mrs. Hayes, would you be willing to make a formal statement about the forged signature? I looked at Ryan. Then I said yes without hesitation. After They left. I thought the hardest part was over. It was not at 4 in the afternoon. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. A man's voice said, "You should have taken the money." I froze. "Who is this?" "You know who, Victor." He laughed quietly. "You think lawyers can protect you?" I said nothing. He continued, "That house is worth more than you understand. It will never belong to you forever." I looked through the window. The street was empty. Then Victor said something that made my blood run cold. "You have something I need." "What?" "A document." "Something Walter left." "Give it to me." And this ends. I understood immediately. He was not talking about the house. He was talking about the final document. Walter had prepared the document that could expose everything. I tightened my grip on the phone. No, there was silence. Then Victor said, "You really are more stubborn than Sabrina said." And the call ended. I stood there staring at the phone. A few seconds later another message arrived. "Tomorrow, I am coming to collect what belongs to my family." I looked at the words, then I smiled because Victor had made one final mistake. He had just admitted that he intended to come to my property, and this time I would not be waiting for him alone. The next morning I woke before sunrise. I did not sleep much. Victor's words had stayed in my mind all night. "Tomorrow I am coming to collect what belongs to my family." He had said it with such confidence, as if my house had already become his, as if my life had already been decided by people I barely recognized anymore. But this time I was not afraid. Daniel had arranged for the investigators to be informed. The cameras were working. Every document was secured, and Ryan was staying with me at 7 in the morning. Daniel arrived. He brought another attorney with him. They checked the cameras and reviewed the documents again. Then Daniel looked at me. "Margaret, there is something important you need to understand. What you do not have to meet Victor the first. No, if he comes here you stay inside. We will handle it." I nodded, but I also knew something. Victor believed fear would make me surrender. He did not understand that fear had already taken everything from me. Once Walter, my husband, my best friend, after losing him, I had learned that there were worse things than being afraid. One of them was allowing fear to decide the rest of your life. At 8:30 Ryan came downstairs. He looked exhausted. "Did you sleep a little?" He sat beside me. "Mom, I want to apologize." "You have already apologized." "Not for this, for all of it." I looked at him. "I should have stood beside you from the beginning. I should have believed you when you said no. I should have told Sabrina that your house was yours. I should have protected you instead of trying to keep everyone happy." I reached across the table. "Ryan, you are doing it now." He nodded. Then the doorbell rang. We all froze. It was 8:42. Daniel looked at me. "Stay here." He walked toward the front window. He looked outside, then he turned back. "It is Victor." My heart began pounding. Ryan stood. "What is he doing here this early?" Daniel raised his hand. "Nobody opens that door." We watched from the security camera. Victor stood on my porch. He was wearing an expensive dark coat. He looked calm, almost amused. He rang the bell again. Then he looked directly into the camera. I knew he could see it. He smiled. My phone rang. Victor the first did not answer. It rang again. Then a message appeared. "I know you are inside." Daniel took a screenshot. "Good, keep everything." Victor knocked on the door. Then he spoke loudly. "Margaret, I know you are home." I stayed silent. He continued, "We can settle this without lawyers." Daniel whispered, "Let him talk." Victor walked toward the camera. "You have something that belongs to my family." I finally answered through the door, "Nothing here belongs to you." He smiled. "That is where you are wrong. This house was built by my family." I corrected him. "My husband and I built this house." Victor laughed. "Walter is dead. You should stop pretending. He still controls things." The words hit me harder than I expected, but I stayed calm. "My husband may be gone, but his wishes are not." Victor became angry. "You have no idea what you are dealing with." "I know exactly what I am dealing with." Then I said, "A man who tried to use my property as collateral, a man who submitted a document with my forged signature, a man who lied about ownership, and a man who has now admitted he wants something Walter left behind." Victor stopped smiling. Daniel looked at me. I had said enough. Victor stepped back from the door. "You think those papers will save you?" "No," I answered. "The truth will." He stared at the camera for several seconds. Then he walked back to his car. We watched him leave. Ryan exhaled. "Is that it?" "No." Daniel shook his head. "It is just the beginning." 2 hours later the investigators arrived. They asked me to give another statement. This time I told them exactly what Victor had said. They took the recording. Then they asked about the document Walter had left. I hesitated. Daniel looked at me. "You decide." I went upstairs. I opened the small safe Walter had installed years ago. Inside was the final envelope. I brought it downstairs. The investigator examined the seal. "What is inside?" "I do not know everything, but Walter said it could expose the people trying to take my house." We opened it together. Inside were copies of financial records, but there was something else, a letter addressed to Victor. The first read it, "Victor, if you are reading this, then you have ignored every warning I gave you." My hands went cold. Walter knew. He had known about Victor long before he died. The letter continued, "I know about the debts, I know about the companies, and I know you have asked Ryan for access to our property. I will not allow you to use my family home to solve problems you created yourself. There was more. I have spoken with my attorney. No member of my family will be allowed to use this property as collateral, and if you attempt to do so, I will provide every record I have to the authorities." I looked at Daniel. He nodded slowly. Walter had documented everything, every loan, every request, every conversation, every attempt. Victor had been warned years ago, But he had ignored the warning. The investigator looked up. This is extremely important. Why? Because it establishes prior knowledge. I handed him the letter. Take it. He placed it into a protective folder. Then he asked, did Walter ever tell you about this? No. Why not? Because he wanted me to live peacefully. The investigator nodded. And that may be the reason he kept it hidden. I sat back. For the first time I understood the strange confidence Walter had shown near the end of his life. He had known that protecting me was not about stopping every bad thing from happening. It was about making sure I could survive it. When it did that evening, Ryan and I sat in the garden. The house was quiet. The children were upstairs watching a movie. Ryan looked at me. Mom, what do you think Dad knew this would happen? I looked at the cherry tree. Maybe. Not exactly, but he knew people could change when money became involved. Ryan nodded. I wish I had listened to him. I touched his hand. You still can. He smiled sadly. Then my phone buzzed. Another message. This one was from Sabrina. I need to see you. I showed Ryan. He stared at the screen. Do not answer. I was about to put the phone away when another message appeared. I know what Victor did. I looked at Ryan. She continued. I did not know how far he would go. Then another message. Please believe me. I did not want him to hurt you. Ryan took a deep breath. She is lying. Maybe, but something about the messages felt different. I called Daniel. He told me not to meet her alone. I said I would not. Then I asked, can she come here if the investigators are present? He paused. If she wants to give a statement, you can arrange it through her attorney. I nodded. I replied to Sabrina, if you want to tell the truth, tell it to the investigators. She did not respond for almost an hour. There was silence. Then my phone rang. This time it was Sabrina. I answered on speaker. Her voice sounded broken. Margaret, yes, I am scared. I said nothing. Victor is not going to stop. Why? Because he owes people more money than I told you how much. She gave me an amount. I looked at Daniel. He immediately began writing it down. Sabrina continued. He thinks your house will solve everything. I asked, and what do you think? She started crying. I thought if Helen moved in you would eventually give us access. I closed my eyes. You knew from the beginning. Yes. I asked one final question. Did you forge my signature? There was a long silence. Then she whispered, no. Victor did. Did you know he was going to do it? Another silence. I knew he was trying something. That was not an answer. She began crying harder. I knew. Ryan stood up. I could see the pain in his face. He walked away from the table. I asked Sabrina, why did you do this? Because I was desperate. You used your mother. I know you used my son. I know you tried to take my home. I know. Then she said something that changed the entire direction of the story. Margaret, there is something I never told you. What? Victor has another copy of something Walter left behind. My heart stopped. What copy? I do not know, but he told me that if you ever found it you would understand why Walter was really afraid of him. I looked at Daniel. He was already standing. What did Walter know about Victor? Sabrina whispered. He knew what Victor had done to another family. And that family disappeared after they tried to expose him. The line went silent. I felt every hair on my arms rise. Daniel took the phone from me. Sabrina, do not hang up. Tell us everything. But before she could answer, we heard a loud crash on her end. Then the call went dead. Ryan rushed back into the room. What happened? I looked at Daniel. He was already calling the investigators. Something had happened to Sabrina. And suddenly the fight over my house was no longer just about money. It had become something much darker. And whatever Walter had discovered years ago, Victor had been willing to do almost anything to keep hidden. The crash on the other end of the phone was followed by silence. I stared at the screen. Ryan was standing beside me. Mom, I could not answer. Daniel was already calling the investigators. Within minutes they were on their way. Nobody spoke while we waited. The children were still upstairs. I did not want them to hear anything. I kept thinking about what Sabrina had said. Walter knew what Victor had done to another family. That sentence would not leave my mind. When the investigators arrived, they took the phone records and immediately went to Sabrina's address. We waited almost an hour later. My phone rang. It was one of the investigators. Sabrina is alive. I closed my eyes. Thank God. She was frightened and shaken, but she is cooperating. Ryan sat down. What happened? There was an argument between Sabrina and Victor. He left before the investigators arrived, but she has agreed to give a full statement. I looked at Daniel. Then the investigator continued. She also gave us information about another case involving Victor. What kind of case? A family that lost their business several years ago. The investigators had already been looking into Victor because of financial fraud. Sabrina's statement gave them information they did not have before. Then came the part that shocked me. Victor had been using family members and friends to obtain access to properties. He would convince people that he was helping them. Then he would create financial claims against their homes. Sometimes the claims were legitimate, sometimes they were not. The goal was always the same: control the property, sell it, or use it to obtain more money. I sat quietly. Suddenly everything made sense. Victor had not discovered my house by accident. He had been watching it for years. He knew its value. He knew Walter was gone, and he knew Ryan was vulnerable, but he had underestimated one thing: Walter had prepared for him. The investigator told me that Sabrina had agreed to cooperate fully. She had admitted that she helped Victor create the false story about my health. She admitted that she had brought Helen into the house to create emotional pressure. She admitted that she hoped I would eventually transfer control of the property. And she admitted that she had known Victor was trying to use the house as collateral. Ryan sat beside me. His face was filled with pain. She really did all of it. I put my hand on his shoulder. Yes, he looked down. I loved her. I know. How do you stop loving someone who turned out to be someone you never really knew? I thought about Walter then. I answered, you do not stop loving someone in one day. You simply stop allowing that love to control your decisions. Ryan nodded slowly. The investigation continued for several weeks. Victor was eventually arrested on charges connected to financial fraud and document forgery. The forged signature was officially identified as fraudulent. The false property filing was removed. The affidavit Helen had signed was withdrawn after she explained how she had been deceived, and my house, the house Walter and I had built together, was finally protected from every claim. But there was one more thing I needed to do. I asked Daniel to activate the trust, not to punish Ryan, not to punish Sabrina, but to make sure nobody could ever use my home as a weapon. Again, the trust protected my right to live there for the rest of my life. After that, the house could eventually pass to my grandchildren, not because they were entitled to it, but because I wanted them to inherit something built from love rather than greed. Ryan did not receive direct control. Instead, he received financial support from a separate account that Walter had created for him, but there were conditions. He had to manage it responsibly. He could not use it as collateral, and nobody else could control it. For the first time, Ryan had to build his own life without hiding behind me, without hiding behind Sabrina, without trying to make everyone happy. And slowly, he changed. He moved into a small apartment. He found another job. He began paying his debts. He spent more time with Ethan and Chloe, and he started telling them the truth about responsibility. Not every detail. They were still children, but enough for them to understand that mistakes do not have to become your identity. Helen stayed in her new apartment. She visited me every Sunday. Sometimes we drank coffee together. Sometimes we simply sat in the garden. One afternoon, she looked at the cherry tree Walter planted that beautifully. I smiled. He nearly killed it 3 times. She laughed. Then she became quiet. I am sorry. You have said that many times. I know, but I still mean it. I looked at her. Helen, you were manipulated, but you also learned from it. That matters. She nodded. I should have asked questions. We all should have. She smiled. Then she asked, do you ever wish you had sold the house? I looked around the garden at the windows, at the old wooden bench where Walter used to sit, at the cherry tree. No, not because the house is valuable. Then why? Because this is where I learned something important. What? That being kind does not mean giving everyone access to your life. I looked toward the front door. For years I had believed saying no was selfish. Now I understood that sometimes saying no is the kindest thing you can do for yourself. Months later, Ryan came to visit with the children. Ethan ran into the garden. Grandma, I smiled. What? Look. He pointed at the cherry tree. There are new flowers. I looked up. He was right. Small white blossoms had appeared. I touched one gently. Walter had planted that tree years ago. It had survived storms, cold winters, drought, and neglect, but every spring it bloomed again. I realized then that people can be like trees. Sometimes life cuts you down. Sometimes people you trust hurt you. Sometimes you lose parts of yourself, but that does not mean you are finished. It means you have another season to grow. Ryan came to stand beside me. Mom, yes, I want to thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. I smiled. You were never the person I wanted to give up on. He looked toward the house. Dad would be proud of you. I looked at Walter's photograph through the window. I hope so. Ryan hugged me. Then he whispered, I finally understand what he was trying to teach me. What? Family is not the person who demands the most from you. Family is the person who respects your boundaries even when they do not get what they want. I smiled. Now you understand. That evening after everyone left, I walked through the house alone. I entered the kitchen, the living room, the staircase, the bedroom where Walter and I had slept. Everything looked exactly the same, but I was not the same woman anymore. I had started this story believing I was fighting to protect a house. I was wrong. I was fighting to protect my right to make my own decisions. The house was only the symbol. The real battle was about dignity, about trust, about knowing that love should never require you to surrender your safety. I walked to the fireplace. The envelope Walter had left was still there. I opened it one final time. At the bottom of the last page was a sentence I had not noticed before. Margaret, if you ever have to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself, choose yourself. I smiled through my tears. Then I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. Outside the window, the cherry tree moved gently in the evening wind. For the first time in a long time, the house felt completely peaceful, not because nobody could ever hurt me again, but because I finally knew I could survive it if they tried. And sometimes that is what strength really looks like. Not shouting, not revenge, not destroying the people who hurt you. Sometimes strength is simply standing at the door of your own home, looking at someone who believes they are entitled to your life, and calmly saying, no, this is mine, and you do not get to take it. If this story touched you, remember one thing: having boundaries does not make you selfish. Protecting your home does not make you cruel, and saying no to someone you love does not mean you love them less. Sometimes the most important person you need to protect is yourself. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments, if you were Margaret, would you have allowed your daughter-in-law and her mother to move into your home, or would you have said no from the very beginning? Thank you for listening, and remember, never let anyone convince you that protecting your peace is something you should feel guilty about.